Did you know that the greatest footballer of all time died poor? He left no inheritance for his children, and there was almost no money in his bank account at the time of his death. He lost everything. But before we get to that, let's start with another World Cup winner who was left handicapped in the middle of his career. Paul Pogba, a name synonymous with football greatness, reached the pinnacle of his career in 2018. He won the World Cup and celebrated triumphantly with his family. But behind the scenes, a darker story was unfolding. After the final in Moscow, Pogba's elder brother, Matthias, stole the spotlight, seemingly happy for his brother's success and his country's victory. However, Paul Pogba would soon discover that family that you think are happy for you are the ones who can destroy you. The same man who celebrated Pogba's victory along with Paul's childhood friends had attempted to extort $13 million from him, $1 million for each year of his professional career. The plot only failed because the bank flagged the transaction as suspicious. Paul Pogba was forced to pay 100,000 euros at gunpoint. But Matthias and his associates were not satisfied. When Paul refused to bow to further demands, Matthias released a bombshell video on social media alleging that Paul Pogba had hired a witch to cast spells on his teammates, including Kylian Mbappe. Maybe the spell is the reason Mbappe did not win the Champions League with PSG. Matthias Pogba might know better. The scandal triggered the football world, but Paul Pogba's fans stood by him. Unfortunately, his troubles were far from over. While sidelined with an injury at Juventus, Pogba was randomly selected for a doping test. The results were devastating. He failed. Punishment was a 4-year ban from football. Paul Pogba, who was at the height of his career, now faces a long road to redemption. He won't be eligible to return until he is 34. Sounds like the end of his career, but he didn't land in prison like number 2. The ever-smiling Ronaldinho was at one time the highest-paid player in the world. In 2006, he earned over $19 million from endorsement deals. He had endorsements with Nike, Coca-Cola, EA Sports, Pepsi, and Danone. Every company wanted something to do with him because he was loved even by those who were supposed to be his enemies. The ball listens to him, and his ability to do magic with it earned him a standing ovation at the Bernabeu. He was a proud winner of the World Cup and the Champions League. While amassing great wealth and creating a name for himself, he was also preparing to destroy everything. He loves partying. Ronaldinho is known for clubbing with multiple women, and that didn't stop after his shocking retirement in January 2018. Soon after his retirement, the Brazilian wanted to marry his 2 girlfriends at an unofficial ceremony, but the plans ended when the media couldn't stop talking about it. But the Brazilian star kept both relationships and even had separate bedrooms with the 2 ladies. He had 2 ladies in his life, but the playmaker wanted more and more ladies to flirt with until his 2 girlfriends left him. He spent so much money on these ladies, but was not paying his taxes. In July 2019, 57 of his properties and his Brazilian and Spanish passports were confiscated because of unpaid taxes and fines. When the judge asked him and his brother to pay a fine of 6 million reais, they couldn't pay. An investigation into their bank accounts revealed that the once wealthy player was left with only $5. That was quite surprising for a man whose net worth was about $125 million at the time of his retirement. But his woes were far from over. In March 2020, the Brazilian, alongside his brother, was arrested in Paraguay for entering the country with a fake passport. They were only released after paying $1.6 million as part of a plea deal. But how did he pay the money if he had no money? Former teammates at Barcelona and Brazil could be responsible for his release from prison. The millionaire lost everything, but not his smile and his magical feet. While in prison, he competed in a prison futsal tournament. Guess the team that won? You guessed correctly. Ronaldinho's team won 11 goals to 2, with the former Barcelona player scoring 5 goals and assisting the other 6. Although he left Paraguay as a broke man, he somehow managed to leave his prison mates happy. He only lost his money, but not the respect of fans, unlike number 3. The game of soccer is incomplete without a mention of the only man who has won 13 Premier League titles. Ryan Giggs is a symbol of football loyalty after playing his entire career at Manchester United. The fans loved him, and the younger players looked up to him. But Ryan Giggs' loyalty ends on the pitch with United, and no atom of it follows the player home, which made him lose everyone's respect. How did it happen? In March 2003, the football star met Natasha at a nightclub and spent the night with her while his then pregnant fiancée was at home. That might not be so bad, but 2 months later, Rodri, Ryan Giggs' brother, started dating Natasha. Giggs respected his brother's relationship initially, but 1 year into it, they resumed the sexual relationship, meeting gigging in hotel rooms and vacant properties. Natasha was a real estate agent and had access to several vacant properties. Giggs was always ready to render his services whenever called upon, but the worst is yet to happen. The sexual relationship continued until 2005 when Natasha had her first baby for Rodri, but Ryan Giggs didn't know when to take a break. The messy affair continued for the next 8 years, and she even aborted a baby for Ryan Giggs 2 weeks before her wedding to Rodri Giggs. 2 weeks! Yes, you heard that right, and they would have continued longer if Ryan was able to stick to one cheating partner. In 2011, Natasha discovered that Giggs was also having an affair with a Welsh model. She couldn't take it and blew the whistle about their affair. She opened the can of worms, and reports of Giggs' other secret affairs were flying in from all angles. One lady who worked with Manchester United described him with these words: Giggs had a certain type of ladies that he went for, and if there was a party at the club and some of them were going to be there, you could bet your last pound that so too would Giggs. Even the football star knew who he was. During one of his trials, he told the judge that he was a flirt by nature. Giggs' affair with his brother's wife ruined his relationship with his family. His father said he was ashamed of him, and his brother Rodri mocked him in a Paddy Power advert. Rodri's marriage to Natasha would later end in 2013 after a failed attempt to keep the family united. Ryan's marriage to Stacey also ended later. The Giggs' family cut ties with Ryan after the news broke out, and he has been trying to mend ties since then because family is everything. The pieces are still scattered, and he hopes to get everything back someday, but number 4 lost things he could never recover. Emmanuel Eboue was on the same team as Thierry Henry and earned millions of dollars during his playing days at Arsenal. He drove flashy cars and lived in a mansion. After his impressive career in England, he moved to Galatasaray, earning about $1.5 million yearly. In all these, he found love in the arms of Oruma, a Belgian lady. The Ivorian felt secure in her arms and let her do all the money management. Technically, his wife was his accountant, which is understandable because of Eboue's poor educational background. He would sign every document from her, and one day, he unknowingly signed all his properties in England to his wife. Disaster struck when, after the right-back's career, the two became involved in a bitter divorce battle. On reaching the court, Eboue realized that the woman he trusted most had deceived him into signing a document that transferred all his properties to her name. After the messy divorce, Oruma was awarded all their assets, and Eboue watched painfully as the results of his hard work slipped from his hands. At the time, he said he couldn't even afford the money to continue to have any lawyer or barrister. He even said he was scared of living in his apartment because he did not know when the police would come. He said, "My own house. I suffered to buy my house, but I am now scared. I'm not going to sell my clothes or sell what I have. I will fight until the end because it is not fair." He was depressed and contemplating suicide before his former club Galatasaray offered him a coaching job with the youth team. Later, as the years pass, Eboue manages to regain his life. He's remarried to his childhood sweetheart and currently runs a football academy in the Ivory Coast. He said these have helped him regain his lost happiness. But number 5 might not regain his happiness and respect. With 43 trophies, Dani Alves is the second most decorated football player with only 1 trophy behind Lionel Messi. His time at Barcelona was marked by beautiful goals and assists. The club's golden generation is incomplete without a mention of his name, but the love and admiration soon turned into hatred when on January 20th, 2023, the Catalan police arrested the Brazilian and charged him with sexual assault for a sexual affair with an unknown lady 3 weeks earlier at a Barcelona nightclub. Alves initially denied the accusation, but DNA from the scene showed the Brazilian had something to do with it. The unknown lady's account of the events matched with the result of investigators, and there was no way out for the star. He admitted to sleeping with the lady, but insisted that it was consensual. When asked why he lied about the incident at first, he said he did so because he wanted to save his marriage. His biggest fear became a reality after admitting the affair, and his wife was quick to demand a divorce. Still broken by an imminent divorce, his club at the time, Unam Pumas, terminated the player's contract and demanded a compensation of 4.5 million euros from him for what was described as very serious infractions of his contract. The termination meant Alves had lost about 50,000 euros for image and publicity rights. One after the other, every contract with the Brazilian was being terminated. Adidas, the clothing giant, One Times Partners, a major betting company, Hygia Saúde, a Brazilian insurance company, and Ethica, another clothing firm, all parted ways with the player. The economic muscle of Dani Alves was weakened beyond imagination. Something more important was also damaged: his relationship with friends and the fans. All he did for the Brazilian national team was erased in seconds, as football fans at home were calling for the removal of his status in Juazeiro. The love was replaced by hatred, and even his teammates kept their distance because no one wanted to be associated with the rapist. Felipe Melo, a Brazilian player who played with Alves, even said he'd have to pay for what he did. Alves was all alone, and despite the effort of his lawyers to save him, he was found guilty of rape on February 22, 2024, and sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Immediately, Barcelona retired him from the Legends section of the club. Although he had up to €1 million to bail himself 1 month later, the name he made for himself after over 2 decades of impressive football was gone, and gone forever. He went from a legend to a rapist. But which is better, going from a legend to a rapist, or from the greatest of all time to a poor Argentine like number 6? Diego Maradona is arguably the greatest footballer of all time. Although he scored a World Cup winning goal with his hand, his dribbles and solo goals are admired to this day. He earned millions of euros during his playing days at Napoli and Barcelona. He even made more money after retirement from his coaching career and endorsement deals. But at the time of his death, he had only €75,000 in his bank account. So, what happened to all the wealth he accumulated? Maradona was a drug addict. He began using cocaine in 1983 when playing at Barcelona. When he joined Napoli, his addiction was already full-blown, which affected his footballing career. In 1991 and 1994, the Argentine was banned from football for abusing drugs. He had an unstable career until he retired from the game. Maradona had another major problem, and it is difficult to tell if it was as a result of his drug addiction. He was super generous, and people took advantage of his generosity. An Argentine journalist who had been close to the legend said Maradona's wealth was squandered because of his pierced hands and largely stolen to trick him and empty his pockets. All they had to do was ask, and he gave. His lawyer, Angelo Pisani, also said he lived beyond his means and was very generous. If you want to know where his money went, talk to the people who surrounded him and used him. He never had more than £100 in his pocket. His close associates said the former millionaire died poor despite his lucrative playing and managerial career, and left almost no money for his children as inheritance. Some have argued that his acts were deliberate. In his final years, he said, "I know that now, as you get older, people are more concerned about what you leave behind than what you are doing. And I tell them all that I'm not going to leave them anything, that I'm going to give it all away. Everything I've got in my life, I'm going to give away." What do you think? Was it Maradona's will to die poor? Number 7 wanted to live like Maradona when he had very little. Wes Brown was one of the silent hard workers at Manchester United, but the fullback earned less than half the salaries of Rio Ferdinand and Cristiano Ronaldo. Brown was one of the lowest earners at the club when compared to his peers. He earned about €50,000 weekly, but his longevity at the club made many believe he was earning big money. He earned millions of dollars throughout his career, but unlike most stars, he had very little or no endorsements. If he had managed his little money properly, he still would have lived comfortably, but he thought his salary was enough to live extravagantly. After all, his teammates were having good times, buying flashy cars, wristwatches, and properties that were not even needed. Maybe he forgot that these players were earning 5 or 6 times his salary. He copied the lifestyle of his rich teammates and bought unnecessary properties with the little money he had. He bought a farm where his wife lived for about €7 million and later realized that it was a poor investment decision when he wanted to sell the property. He tried all he could do to sell the farm for the same amount he bought it, but there was no buyer for it. Even after lowering the price to about €4.75 million, there was still no buyer. Another property he had was listed at €4.5 million, but after 7 years of listing, there was no buyer. A buyer finally came when the property was listed for €2.4 million, almost half the price. There was still another problem. Brown's wife, Leanne, thought they were richer than they were. She thought marrying a footballer meant owning a bank. In 2019, she said, "Yes, we've got a lovely life and all this money. And I'm not saying the money isn't great, but when you're in it, you're living in this bubble." There was even a time she bought a jumpsuit worth €2,000 and announced it. She gladly spent her husband's money, but with his permission though. Brown's wife, who was part of a TV show during his husband's playing days, would introduce herself saying, "I married a footballer, I live in a fairly big house, I would say it's worked out well." Wes Brown's attitude towards money and that of his wife drained their wealth, and a costly divorce finished whatever was left in the player's bank account. When a bankruptcy application was filed against him, it took seconds for the High Court to approve it. When asked about why he was unable to safeguard his wealth, he said he was surrounded by the wrong people in his earlier years. years. His ex-wife said they went from grace to grass because people took advantage of them. The star, who once lived in a mansion and drove exotic cars, is now living in a modest apartment, thanks to former teammates Wayne Rooney and Michael Carrick, who would not let their old friend down. His situation might be bad, but number 8 is just waiting for his death. Craig Bellamy played for some of the biggest clubs in the Premier League, including Liverpool, Manchester City, and West Ham. Although his paychecks were mouth-watering, the player was never moved by money. During an interview, he said, "When I was a young player starting at Norwich, my biggest fear was money. I was always wary of it. I didn't want to end up with a lot of money but no career. I would give you all the money as long as I could keep my career. I always thought money would be the devil. It would distract me to a point where I would lose my hunger." The footballer, despite being wealthy, avoided even his own money and left everything in the hands of allies. He didn't know where his money was, and those in charge spent them like they were papers. He volunteered himself to be exploited. He said he never gambled all his life except that he gambled on people. Whoever was in charge of Bellamy's wealth made failed investment decisions, including a wasteful purchase of properties in London. The only known assets purchased by Bellamy were 5 wristwatches to mark landmarks in his life. He is only left with one of the wristwatches, as the other 4 have been used to offset some debts. Whenever he had money, Bellamy gave out without thinking twice because he would feel guilty to say no. One time, his best friend ripped him off after spending so much to make his life better. Most painfully, these friends and unsolicited financial advisors had abandoned him because the money was finished. Although he is currently the head coach of Burnley following the departure of Vincent Kompany to Bayern Munich, he has not recovered from the thought that everything he worked for was mismanaged because he thought money was the devil. He said, "The last 5 or 6 years on death row, just waiting for someone to put me out. I've been waiting for the cell door to open and someone to say, 'Today's the day.'" He even said bankruptcy was a relief for him. Bellamy wants the young players to learn from his mistakes and learn how to say no when it is not convenient to give. He also wants players to be in control of their wealth so they won't be vulnerable like him. But the reason number 9 lost all his wealth is even more surprising. He was making babies when he was supposed to be playing football. In 2009, Drenthe was playing alongside Cristiano Ronaldo at Real Madrid. He had a promising career and he saw himself like a god. He said, "I felt like a god at Real Madrid, playing alongside Cristiano Ronaldo, and I'm proud of it." In his first year at Real Madrid, Drenthe earned 1.4 million euros as salary and another 430,000 euros as a sign-on bonus. Money was not his problem, and if he continued the way he was, more and more millions would have found their way into his bank account. But instead of training and concentrating on the game, Drenthe was having fun and making babies. "Women have always been a very big reason for the money disappearing," Drenthe said during an interview. He had 3 children with his first wife and married another lady whom he claimed he fell in love with, and they had a son. In total, he has 6 children with 3 women. 6 children are not so many, but for Drenthe, they were the results of his lack of concentration. The money Drenthe didn't spend on women, he squandered on holidays and nice cars. At one time, he said, "Had I shown more dedication, I might still be playing high-level football, similar to Cristiano Ronaldo." He didn't used to party a lot back in the day. If he had done so, he'd have retired from football by now. Drenthe knew his indiscipline was the cause of his woes, and even before his retirement, he was already swimming in financial crises. His effort to regain his balance saw him play for Everton, Reading, and Sheffield, but his peak had passed and there was almost nothing he could do to redeem himself. In 2020, the former Real Madrid star was declared bankrupt after losing his fortune worth 3.2 million euros. He currently works as a health worker in the Netherlands, but losing a mental battle like number 10 is the worst that can happen to anyone. Wilson Oruma is an Olympic gold winner with Nigeria and played most of his professional career in France. He was a diligent spender and saved enough money to enjoy his retirement, but an unknown pastor and some family members defrauded him of his entire savings of about $13 million, which at some point affected his mental health. Oruma said during an interview that, "It is true that I lost all my savings to some people who turned out to be fraudsters. The most painful aspect of it all was the fact that some of my relations were involved in the deal." Oruma had isolated himself because the media had not been kind to him. He still wishes that the fraudsters would someday return his hard-earned money, even if it is part of it. These football players were at the top of the game, only to face unimaginable downfall. But who truly lost the most? Was it the ones who squandered their wealth, those who fell from grace, or endured heartbreaking and expensive divorces? Please share your thoughts in the comments and let us know who among them truly lost everything.